Hey, this is the latest edition of Front Up, and I'm Whitey Willauer, and I've got some great guests today. And the first guest is mikemisurelli. And Mike, I gather you're head of the Landscapers Organization, or what do you call that?
That's correct, Whitey. It's called the Nantucket Landscape Association. Pretty simple.
And how many members do you have?
We have about 30 companies that are active members. I would say there's quite a few more companies on island. That covers I'd say the larger to medium ones. There's some very small companies, but we'd estimate that there's probably in excess of 100 companies on island.
Yeah, I was surprised yesterday when I was trying to find the name of your company in there and trying to use your telephone to find out what your name of your company. What's the name of your company?
G&M Landscape Services.
So I didn't guess right.
Okay.
Okay, but there were a lot of landscapers. I mean, that seems like a major business here on Nantucket.
Yeah, it is. I mean, most people, as we know, have second homes here, so probably the last thing they want to do is cut their grass when they're here enjoying their time. So it does make opportunities for landscapers, and it's a fairly easy business to get into with a pickup truck, dog, and a trailer.
I see.
And a lawnmower.
Well, do you need grass on the island? Our place in Dionis, we've just used the natural thing and cut it back, and it seems to work.
Well, that works for some people, and others enjoy a nice lawn or not such a nice lawn, but it takes all kinds.
Yeah. Well, there's a situation now with, I guess it's Article 68, which is an act to regulate the content and application of fertilizers used on the town of Nantucket. And I heard you speak the other day, and can you sort of summarize where the landscapers are?
Sure. I guess I've been speaking in opposition to it, but let me start by saying that the Landscape Association is 100% on board with the stated goal of the Harbor Plan Committee, Implementation Committee, to do the best that we can for the water. We all live here and want to enjoy what Nantucket has to offer and be sensible about how we do that. I guess one of the things I was curious about, or I guess we could say an objection to, was I didn't feel like that the developers of the article brought in input from landscapers, golf course superintendents, retailers, arborists until very late in the process or late in the process. So that has been one of the things I've been sort of consistent about, speaking about with the article.
Now, they had you there, I believe, last Saturday was the first big meeting with the landscapers and the Harbor Plan Committee. Did anything develop from that?
Yeah, there was good intent in the room, and I think and even Sarah said that this was actually 2 Saturdays ago, because it was the Civic League Forum was this Saturday. There were some good ideas put forth by landscapers, by some of the sports turf guys, and we talked about certification, local certification, which I think should be linked to perhaps a state organization or a college, or even like UMass or Cornell, something like that. So, but that's going to take a little exploring.
Well, I had Smitty on yesterday, who's a scalloper, and he's concerned about next year and how much nitrates get into the harbor.
Right.
And so is there any interim solution that we can think about?
Well, first of all, I think scallopers should be part of the solution, and ultimately I think it's going to take everybody working together to get there. The interim measures, Sarah puts forth a lot of very good things in the article. I also think there's some loopholes, and it contradicts itself in a few places, which I can make an example to. But good landscape practices are going to be part of it, and education is going to be part of it. The education component is one place where I think everybody needs to team up, because it can be inherently difficult to do. Schedule these things, have a place to meet. There's expenses, and it's going to take sort of a team effort to keep that alive.
How about the owners of the property? How do you approach them? Or should they be approached?
Well, I think they should. My experience has been, you know, I've never had a customer tell me their lawn has to be golden or Augusta National super green early in the season. My experience has been they want to be sensible. They enjoy living here too. So, you know, slow release fertilizer is a very good component of that. We already use it quite a bit. There is some danger in using slow release fertilizers when the soil temperature isn't cooperating, because then it's just sitting there on the surface and has potential to run off, which I think is one place where you know, people in the green industry, for lack of a better term, could have contributed something to the dialogue.
Yeah. Now, there's some regulations in the article, like when in other words, they limit it. They say, I guess, from October 1st to April 1st, you shouldn't fertilize. Is that onerous, or
not for landscapers? You know, we're typically not out doing anything before April 1st, or you know, that's good practices is not to be out before April 1st with fertilizer. It makes perfect sense. If the grass isn't actively growing, it's not going to uptake it, and we have a cooler spring here. So that's not a problem for us. I know some of the sports turf guys, the golf courses, they like to do things a little earlier. They do things differently. They can go out with a ½ pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet, and it's cost effective for them. So they voiced a little concern on the timeline. But Nantucket Golf Club does water monitoring, and that was part of their conditions to have the golf course permitted, and they have, you know, data that I think should come forward as well for reviewing.
And I think Maya Comet does quite a bit also. Maya Comet Golf Club.
Yes.
But those don't look like, to me, those two aren't really hot spots because they don't really flow into the harbor. I think I would estimate that it's the peripheral around the closeness to the harbors are the real place where we need the most effort. Do you agree on that one?
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But in this one, the golf courses happen to be included, so they're
you got to, because if everybody has to go by the same rules.
Right.
Now you have a lot of non-English speaking people on the island that are doing lawn and landscaping. How would you reach them?
Well, we discussed this a little bit at the meeting with Sarah out at the UMass field station, and you know, it was discussed that maybe some of the literature or some of it does have to be printed in Spanish and circulated. It's not the only culture we have here on the island. So there's Bulgarian, there's Lithuanian, and you name it. I think.
Well, I was surprised at the number of Spanish-speaking people that don't read Spanish, and in other words, they haven't been educated as well as, say, the Bulgarians. And how would you reach them?
Well, good question. I think that's one of the reasons it needs to get back to committee level. It's not going to be all my ideas or Dr. Oktay's ideas or the committees that develop this and get some ideas and some grassroots plans and start reaching them. It's certainly through the retailers. They're going to have to pass out some information.
How cooperative are the retailers so far?
Well, the ones that I've spoken to, a few hadn't really no idea this was going on.
That's
so
interesting. Yeah.
So you know, that's a component of it. So my sense is they would be cooperative. I think they would have to be.
Now, there also, the scuttlebutt says, oh, well, people will buy the fertilizer off island when they're there, load up their truck because they can get it for less cost and bring it on the island. Do you think that's a major concern?
I don't think so. It's, you know, that might be a one and done routine. You know, to load up your pickup truck with a pallet of fertilizer. Most pickup trucks can hold about half a pallet of fertilizer, and then you're paying the boat ticket to go back and forth. That's not really gonna.
So that's just sort of in the noise, so to speak. Yeah.
And commercial guys, you know, are buying from. One of the reasons I thought the retailers were really important was because people go into Valero's or to Marine Home Center, and that's who they're using for their supplier. So they need to be you know, on board with whatever the plan is, so they can help get the right product out there and the message across.
Now, how about all of the product that is being developed out at the solid waste? What do you use that loam? I guess that is.
Yeah, that's a really good product. I like it. The compost, and then they'll cut the compost with sand, and I like it because it's nice and clean. It's been heated. It's weed free. It's a good product, and from what I understand, they have loads of it out there. It hasn't been as easy to get your hands on as you might think. There's some problems with, you know, going out to the landfill and getting loaded, or it should be in other, you know, retailers' yards as well. But it's a very good product.
Yeah, that's good. Now, what other situations have you looked at as far as this is concerned? What other ones of the conditions are of concern to you? Well,
there's one. There's some wording in there that says, you know, fertilizer will not go down before rain, after rain, and that to me is those are all good ideas, but it's sort of a little ambiguous, because we're certainly going to fertilize, and it surely will rain sometime before or after. So some of that wording is just a little loose and hard to interpret. There's no enforcement clause in the article, and I guess I'm sort of getting to, if we're going to be serious about it, then, and this is, I'm sort of speaking for myself now, that's going to have to be a component of something. And as it is now, there is no enforcement clause, and there's some holes in it, you know, because of that.
If an enforcement clause, I think Sarah has been working on an enforcement clause, and if we had them, how would we monitor? In other words, how would you police I mean, who should police?
Well, that was a question that came up at the finance committee level, and probably one of the reasons they went with a not to adopt, because those all become questions of how to do that, and it costs money to have an enforcement person, perhaps. So that's one of the reasons that I think it needs to go back for further development.
I was just wondering, because there's a lot of regulations on the Island that we put down, we have penalties, and there's no enforcement officer, and yet people self-enforce. I know, for instance, you've got no smoking regulations in elevators. Well, no one's going to smoke in an elevator nowadays, even though in Russia, I was dealing with some Russians once, and they said, well, how do you enforce the no smoking in elevators? And we, all of us Americans, looked at each other and said, well, we just don't smoke in elevators. And if we put this regulation in, wouldn't that be a deterrent in itself? Just by saying, you know, there's a fine, and if you break that, and with the lighting regulations, we just the town manager just appoints somebody to go out and tell the people to, you know, change their lighting. Couldn't we do it that way rather than have a whole bureaucracy?
This one's a little harder to, is a little harder to judge. I mean, you can get a beautiful green lawn from slow release fertilizers. That's not going to be the issue. But if somebody interprets that as somebody used a fast release fertilizer here, and now you're kind of developing camps into adversarial positions, perhaps a neighbor against neighbor, I just think is something that needs further thought and thoughtful discussion.
Wouldn't they have, if they used it, wouldn't they have a bag that says what it is or something around there?
If they saved it,
have a smoking gun or something.
If we show up if I showed up on, not that you have green lawn on your property, but if I left my bag of fertilizer behind, that's not such a great practice. There's just...
Or if I saw you driving around with the wrong kind of fertilizer, I might say, wait a minute, what are you going to do with that?
Well, that's already a state regulation for any commercial people. You're supposed to be certified by the state and have it. The state handles pesticides, and that's another thing that I think needs to be looked at, because by going to 70% slow release fertilizer, you're suddenly going to limit your products a little bit, and now you're going to go away from combination products, and you can get any of these pesticides in their pure form. So that just sort of begs the question: are we going to be actually encouraging a little more pesticide use?
I hope not. Yeah.
So.
Anyway, I noticed that we're running out of time, so have you got one last plug you'd like to put in or anything?
Well, I think I've been consistent saying that I'd like it to go back to committee level for further development. There's plenty of good things in the article, but if we're really going to do a good job and have this article be meaningful, I think we need to get the farms involved and golf courses and in the retailers.
Yeah. Very good.
So that's my...
Well, thank you very much, Mike, and I hope we'll have you back on here after we move further on downstream.
Okay, thanks,
so thank
Whitey.
you.
All right, great. Thank you.
Bye.